How's it going, everybody? Bryan, Alvarez, and Dave Meltzer here. Wrestling Observer Radio, July 17, 2018. Figure4online.com/WrestlingObserver.com. Got a lot of news to get into here today, but before we get into news, 3 legendary names to talk about here today. And I'm going to name them. Dave's going to talk about them. First off, Masa Saito passed away. We talked about this on Wrestling Observer Live a little bit today, but there's so much to say about Masa Saito, and where to begin, Dave?
You tell me. Masa Saito wrestled in the '64 Olympics, which were held in Tokyo. So pretty much all the Japanese, those Olympics got monster television ratings. They were actually the highest rated television shows at that point in the history of Japan. So every Japanese athlete that was on that Olympic team came out as pretty big celebrities. He did not medal in the Olympics, although later in pro wrestling that was exaggerated to being a gold medalist, silver medalist, sometimes bronze medalist, but he didn't medal. But he went into pro wrestling, for a group called Tokyo Pro Wrestling, which was what happened was Antonio Inoki was one of the top stars in JWA, and he left, and they started a promotion. And Masa Saito started out with that group. That group folded. Masa Saito came to the United States, and actually, I believe his first stardom was in Florida, and he got a big push as the Florida heavyweight champion with the idea that he would feud with Jack Briscoe when Jack Briscoe was getting his first big push. So the idea is that Jack Briscoe would beat a Japanese Olympian to win the Florida title, which kicked off the Jack Briscoe main event era in Florida. Then he came out here, and he had a long run, and he came in and out of the Northern California area. He got married, lived in San Francisco. That was his home base for years and years and years. Formed a tag team with Kinji Shibuya, 2-time world tag team champions, probably America's tag team champions a couple times as well. They feuded with, Morales and Gomez and Stevens and Maivia and Gordman and Goliath among, but they were one of the real legendary tag teams of that era. And then he went other places. He was always a star everywhere he went. As far as like a Japanese wrestler working in the United States, a legitimate Japanese wrestler, he was the most enduring star that there ever was. There are guys, Nakamura, Muto, and Giant Baba were bigger stars, but they didn't stay as long. I mean, Saito came to the United States in the late 60s, and he was pretty much here, living here through 1990 or so when the AWA folded. And at that point, he did come back to Japan and worked for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He is I don't know if he was the inventor of the corkscrew suplex, which is now called the Saito suplex, which is done in all over the place. One of the, trademark moves. You see it on every promotion show. He was the inventor of the Sasori Gatame, which is Scorpion Deathlock or Sharpshooter, which, Sting and Bret Hart made famous in the United States, that Riki Choshu made the cool move in Japan for years, but Masa Saito actually taught Riki Choshu, and Riki Choshu was Masa Saito's protege. He had the longest match in Japanese wrestling history, 2 hours and 5 minutes in the jungle with Antonio Inoki. The match sucked. I
almost don't know if you can count that as it is the longest, but he
really went that long.
They were messing around in the jungle, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
It's like going on a hike.
Oh, well, if you're beating each other up on your hike, it's exactly like it, but I don't know if too many hikes like that. But so Inoki and Saito had a really big feud in like 86, 87, which was what happened. Like there was the big Revolution Army and Inoki program. And they didn't want to beat Riki Choshu, who was like the top star of the Revolution Army. So Masa was kind of like the sacrificial lamb. He was the one who had enough credibility to, face Inoki. They could do a good program. He always lost when he faced Inoki, so it got Inoki over. And he wasn't expected to win or anything like that. He was one of the years he went to the finals of the IWGP tournament, which would be essentially like the finals of the G-1. So that happened once. He didn't win it, but he lost to Inoki in the finals. Was AWA champion, although that the belt meant a little bit at the time, but it didn't mean that much because the AWA was pretty much dying by the time they did that. He beat Larry Zbyszko on one of the big Tokyo Dome shows, a legitimate sold-out Tokyo Dome show. But it was a mid-card match on the show. It wasn't like it was the main event or anything like that. Held the WWF tag team titles with Mr. Fuji a couple times. He was the workhorse of the team. In the Shibuya Saito team, he was the workhorse of that team as well. But really underrated in the ring. Really one of the most underrated wrestlers of that era, of the 70s. Because when he wrestled here, he did this... the stereotypical Japanese thing. He did the chops, he did the kicks, the stomps, and didn't do a lot of wrestling. But when we would see him, whether it was in the Southeast, Southeastern Championship Wrestling, or Florida, which was his favorite territory to work, Georgia, where he came in, and places like that, he did a lot more wrestling, and he really was a lot more impressive there. I mean, here it was always like, yeah, he's a really good worker. He was a great athlete. But when you didn't see him do a lot of what he was best at doing. His actual biggest run in the United States would have been when he was in his early 40s, when he did the angle with Hulk Hogan where he broke a trophy over Hulk Hogan's head, and that turned into a big feud in the AWA. It was one of Hulk Hogan's last feuds. And obviously, since Hogan was involved, it drew really big. But yeah, I mean, that's his wrestling career. He was also famous for being in that wild fight with police in Waukesha, Wisconsin, where he beat up several officers. What happened was Ken Patera, he was traveling with Ken Patera, and they were wrestling a match in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And they the show was over, and they were hungry, and wrestlers were wild people then. They went to a McDonald's, and it was closed, but they saw people working in there. So they wanted some hamburgers, and they wouldn't serve them. So allegedly, because Ken Patera has always denied this, but somebody shot-putted like this 40-pound boulder through the window of the McDonald's. Ken Patera was a world-class shot putter and one of the strongest men in the world. It was the belief...
Purely a coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah. The people in the restaurant said this 260-pound bleach blonde guy with long hair threw a boulder through the window. Ken Patera just happened to be in town. The police went to the hotel room where they were staying, and, I don't know exactly what happened. There was a trial and everything like that. Essentially what happened was the police came to arrest Patera, and Patera got in a fight with police, and Saito backed up Patera. And Saito was a real tough guy, not just an Olympic wrestler, but a real tough guy. And it ended up with 10 officers, as I recall, injured, some seriously. And so the two of them spent 2 years in jail. And when Saito came out of jail, he actually had some of the best years of his career. He could have gone back to Japan at the time and not gone to prison, but his mentality was that he lived in Minneapolis. He wanted to stay living in the United States, and rather than go to Japan to escape prosecution and continue his career, he was willing to spend 2 years in jail so he could remain living in the United States. So that's, what happened there. And came back out, and And the funny part is that when he came out, most of his wrestling was done in Japan because the territories were dying. He didn't sign with WWF because he was older, and I don't know if they never made. He was a Minneapolis guy. He had a family there at that point. So later, he settled in Japan. He ended up with Kensuke Sasaki, working for his company. Handling business and things like that, and trained Katsuhiko Nakajima, Mitsuhiro Kitamura, who's now Masa Kitamiya, or Mitsuhiro Kitamiya, who's now Masa Kitamiya, who is his protege and works for Noah and does a total Masa Saito gimmick, same ring pants, same moves, everything. I grew up obviously watching Kinshi Shibuya and Masa Saito. And they were a great team. They were headliners. He could do, he could go anywhere and work the style. He could do this, he could work whatever the style was that they wanted a Japanese wrestler to do. And every area had a different mentality of what it was, from total stereotype to amateur wrestling, heel, to just vicious heel main eventer. He could pull, or in Japan, kind of like that, it was still a heel, but the rough heel role. And I remember in one of the years in the IWGP tournament, I think it was the year that I'm sure it was the year that he took second. He had a famous match with Akira Maeda, and the deal was Maeda was not willing to lose to any Japanese wrestler. In fact, he didn't want to lose to anybody. He did lose once to Bam Bam Bigelow, and just was a complete dick about it, slapping him around, spitting on him and things like that. But, he wouldn't lose to Inoki. He wouldn't lose to Choshu. He wouldn't lose to Fujinami. But he was willing to lose, which shows the respect. Everyone in Japan respected Saito. And he did lose. It was by count out, but in a tournament that counts, he did lose to Masa. Which was, a very famous match at the time because, a Japanese guy beat Maeda. But yeah, just so he was Hall of Famer. Very, just a guy who was always around, who was every place he went, he was a star, won championships for decades. Big star. Well, let's see. I think by the time he was 50, he kind of did slow down, or early 50s, because I remember seeing him. Let's see. I went to Japan. I would say I saw him I remember seeing him on a card with where Benoit and Eddie Guerrero wrestled Liger and Otani, I believe it was, or it might have been Otani and Sasuke, but it was a tag match that was off the charts fantastic. And it was actually it was at the Tokyo City the Tokyo Olympic Gym. It's like a 10,000 seat building that they never use. The crowd was good, wasn't sold out, but I remember I saw Masa wrestle Lex Luger on the card, and that wasn't. It may not have been. I saw him. He may have wrestled Lex Luger in Los Angeles. Could that be right? At the First Peace Festival. But anyway, Masa was on the card. I think he actually wrestled. He may have wrestled Hawk on that card. But whatever it was clear when I saw that he would have been in his 50s by then, that he was not the same Masa Saito by that point. But into his late 40s, he was still, one of the top wrestlers that there was. I mean, he maintained his conditioning and was just a big tank of a guy, especially when he got older. He had Parkinson's disease since 2000. He actually wrestled pretty much until it started taking over and he couldn't wrestle anymore. He wrestled through 99, so he would have been 57 at the time, and then he did not wrestle. I think he did I know he did. He did a comeback match not that many years ago. It was the saddest thing I ever saw because he was so, he couldn't do anything. I mean, he shouldn't have been put in the ring. I just remember that when he did do that comeback match. It wasn't that many years ago. Maybe, you know, I mean, it might have been 10 years ago. But, yeah, it was really sad.
So today, the 17th, is the anniversary of the death of Bruiser Brody. Yesterday, anniversary of the death of Terry Gordy. And I know we've talked about Brody a lot of late. Vice working on something about his life that apparently is going to be something else. A lot of new information, you said.
I don't know if there's so much new information. I mean, they tried. I don't know. There's.
Have you seen this one yet?
The Vice one? No.
Okay.
No, I haven't seen it. I did a podcast with Jericho that will air on Wednesday, where we talked for over an hour about Brody. You know, yeah, he was murdered in the dressing room in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, and it's quite the story. When the High Spots DVD is really something that everybody should see. It goes through everything about Brody. It's really an excellent. It's on the High Spots network. If you're a subscriber to the High Spots network, it's probably the best documentary that they've done, and yeah. But Brody was an awesome figure in pro wrestling. In WWE, I remember for years and years and years, whenever they would have a big guy who was like 6'4" or more, they would tell him to, study tapes of Bruiser Brody. This is how a big guy gets over. This is how a big guy should work in athletic style. He would do the flying. His basic flying would be like leapfrogs and drop kicks, which he could do, which was very impressive at his size that he could do it. But he didn't. It's not like he would fly around a lot. He did it enough to show that he could fly around, but it was mostly to just look tough and fight tough. And he was Flair, who worked with everyone, still to this day would rank Brody as one of the best guys he ever wrestled. He always talked about, Steamboat to him was always his best opponent, but Brody was always in the conversation. And, Brody was a real big draw. He had the ability to go into a place and pop business. That's why he got so much work, even though promoters hated dealing with him, because he was a true independent contractor in the sense that he was going to dictate what he was going to do, and promoters didn't like that. And a lot of promoters didn't want to use him. It was usually promoters who were down on their luck that did. And because he helped their business, they were usually okay with it. It was a lot of the secondary promotions, like a Kansas City or something like that. It was like he was a huge draw there, but he gave them fits. St. Louis, he was one of the. He was really. It's hard to say who the biggest draw was in St. Louis in that era in the mid '80s. Dick the Bruiser was a big draw, but he was old by this point. Ric Flair was a big draw. Ric Flair and Brody had many sellouts. They at one point held the record gate in St. Louis, which was actually a pretty big story because this was after Mushnick was gone and Larry Matysik was the general manager, but Bob Geigel was handling the payoffs. And based on their percentage, I think that they should have gotten $7,200, Flair and Brody, both for the match, but Geigel had this mentality that no wrestler deserves more than $6,000 for a match. So he paid them like $5,900 or some number like that. It was in the $5,950 range or something like that. And Brody took the check, and he knew that he'd been shortchanged $1,300, and he worked for them. He wasn't going to pass off big payoffs until one day there was a show in Des Moines where they had the biggest advance they ever had, It was Bruiser Brody against Kamala, which was a real hot program off of the World Class Television show. And Brody didn't come to Des Moines, and that was his point. And that, that was not unusual for him. If somebody screwed him, he would get back at them. Not when they were expecting it, but when it would hurt. So he hated promoters, for the most part. He did not hate Sam Mushnick. He certainly did not hate Paul Bosch, but he hated, and if promoters, he was skeptical of any promoter. If they never screwed him, he'd be okay with them. But if Brody felt he was screwed by a promoter, he'd walk out on them, without worrying about it. But, he was, mostly, he made most of his money in Japan. He was, at one point, he was the highest paid per week wrestler in the world as far as contract went. I think that Hogan was probably making more as WWF champion, but he was not contracted to make more. Because of that's when Brody worked for New Japan. He got a giant deal with New Japan, but he just couldn't get along with Inoki. So he ended up back with All Japan years later. He had about a year period where he wasn't in Japan at all, which was actually kind of tough, having to make a living in the United States for him. But he was just getting back, and he got really over. I was in Japan in 87 for the Christmas thing, which Brody and Abdullah the Butcher, who had been gone from Japan for years, both of them, both came back on the tour. And Abdullah was as over as Brody, and I actually saw a Brody-Abdullah match in some city, I don't remember which one it was, where it was insane. They just brawled all over the building, and the fans running away from them. It was like just a crazy experience. And he was always, he'd gotten really, really popular again. He never was not, but I just remember when I went there, like the first day I got there, he and Abdullah just come back, and everybody was kind of remarking, because Abdullah was kind of considered like washed up at this point. And it was just like, you won't believe how over Brody and Abdullah are, especially Abdullah. Abdullah was every bit as over as Brody. It was just crazy watching that feud. And then, it was 7 months later, because this is December, that was July. And he was killed in Puerto Rico by Jose Gonzalez, who was acquitted it's funny. I was reading an article that I did after the death of Brody, and I wrote about, this is before the trial, and it just like spooks me, because I wrote about, the trial's going to come, and he's going to be acquitted, and it's like, I wrote about it like just totally unemotional, we all know he's going to get acquitted. We all know the trial's going to be a joke, and that's exactly what happened. Even though there were witnesses, Tony Atlas saw it. There were other witnesses who also didn't testify, some of whom feared for their lives. And soon enough, Jose Gonzalez was Booker. Again, he was Booker at the time he killed Brody, and then he was reinstated as Booker after the trial. Or no, I don't know if it was directly after the trial, but shortly after the trial, he was Booker again. He started wrestling immediately after the trial. So it was, and Puerto Rican wrestling was never the same after that. They never regained their glory. And Brody was one of the biggest draws they ever had. The biggest, as far as Puerto Rico goes, the biggest crowds in the history of that island for pro wrestling were stadium crowds for, I think it was 3 matches with Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen against Carlos Colon and Abdullah the Butcher. That was the peak of the WWC, and TV ratings wise, crowds wise, that was it. And Stan, even though the money was really good, he just stopped going because he just didn't like being there. And Brody liked the money, so he kept going. And there's a lot of different stories as far as, I still don't know why it happened. In the trial, they said that that Jose asked him to lose a match to Danny Spivey. I know that when the thing went down, Victor Quinones, who was Brody's best friend on the island, told me that and it was also worked in the office, said that they didn't ask him to lose, that they would never ask him to lose because they knew he wouldn't. I don't know who's telling the truth. Kind of weird. You kill somebody over, and again, the timing of it and everything. He went into the bathroom. Oh, he's in the dressing room. This is before a show, and Jose. He traveled with Jose the night before to Mayaguez, Puerto Rico, to the show. They actually traveled together. They had no problems, nothing, no arguments or anything like that. The next night, Jose goes, Frank, come to the bathroom. He comes to the bathroom, and literally seconds later, Jose stabbed him to death. There was no time between him asking and the stabbing for there to be any kind of a discussion about anything. I mean, it was not like a fight, yelling, screaming, he pulls out a knife. I mean, they went in the dressing room and he stabs him, over and over. And he probably would have lived if he had gotten better medical attention, but the two things going against him. The first was that it was, I think the story is it was 40 minutes, but I think that when I look back at my own notes, it was, I think, that gets exaggerated over time. I think it really was 25 minutes before the ambulance arrived. For whatever reason, they called the ambulance to get him to the hospital. But at first, the police thought it was like, a pro wrestling angle, so they thought it was like a joke. So it took a while. They didn't respond at first, or didn't believe it at first until they were, finally told it was real. So, and the other problem is that Brody had taken a lot of aspirin because he was going to juice that night in the match with Danny Spivey. And in those days, when you would juice to thin out your blood, you would take a whole bunch of aspirin before the match. I mean, that was Brody, that was just part of what he did. He was a big bleeder. So because of that, his blood, when he got stabbed, wouldn't clot. And, essentially he bled to death. So, the belief when he was stabbed was that he would probably live, but he didn't live. And that was giant news in Japan. In Japan, it was the equivalent, and I know people will think this is exaggeration, but it's not, of the reaction in the United States when John Lennon was killed, because he was a huge celebrity there. I mean, it was more than mainstream. It was, I remember when I went to Japan so he was in 88. So the next time I went to Japan, I remember the reporters going like it was 2 months of nothing but Brody. Every magazine had, covers of Bruiser Brody week after week after week, because that was just what the people were buying, and that was the story that people wanted to know. And the other thing too is that I believe it was the October show at Budokan Hall. The plan was that the main event would be the first ever Bruiser Brody Stan Hansen match. They were going to start the program. They had done one tag match. It was Bruiser Brody and Jimmy Snuka against Stan Hansen and Terry Gordy. And that was to whet the appetites. It was at Korakuen Hall, and it was just to put Brody against Stan, have a few spots where they would no-sell each other, and build to the singles match. And the singles match was supposed to build to this big program, which would be the, King Kong against Godzilla of pro wrestling in Japan. Would have been an amazing program. And, again, had Brody lived, it's really interesting what may have happened, because he died in 88. He was 42 at the time. He was probably going to have a run in the WWF with Hogan. It's hard to say when, because I don't know how quick he would have left All Japan at that point, but he was definitely talking about it, of trying to time it at some point to do the Hogan thing. He would have left WWF for sure after that program, and probably worked Japan. For sure would have worked ECW in that mid-90s period. I have no doubt in my mind he would have done that. I think that he may have, just my gut tells me that he would have eventually left All Japan in the 90s to work FMW and then done a stadium show with Onita. That would have probably done 50,000 people because Terry Funk, did 41,000 and Brody was a bigger draw than Terry Funk. And as far as what else he would have done, I think that he would have been a part of the Monday Night Wars. He'd have been older then. I'm not sure how big he would have been, but I think he would have lasted that long. That's touch and go. But yeah, I mean, a lot of things would have been different. I'm pretty darn sure he would have been in WCW in '89, working with, in between All Japan tours as well for a while, probably before going to WWF, and probably would have had another run with Flair that year. But who knows what would have happened? But it was it's an amazing story. The guy, and Gonzalez ended up booking for years and years after murdering a guy, and was still wrestling up until a couple of years ago. It's crazy.
Terry Gordy.
Terry Gordy passed away in 2001. Terry Gordy was one of the best young wrestlers that there ever was. I mean, he was great when he was like 17, 18 years old. He was main eventing in Mid-South, the Freebirds, with Junkyard Dog and Bill Watts and Buck Robley. So this is 1980. So he would have been 18 and 19 years old at the time. And then he'd have been 19 when he first went to Georgia, which is where the Freebirds got their national push coming out of Mid-South. And I just remember watching him. He was supposed to come to San Francisco years earlier. I think he would have been like 16, 17, because I remember them talking about a 6'6", 300-pound Terry Gordy was going to come in. And he didn't have a big name in wrestling at that point. But, that there weren't a lot of guys who they said were, and he wasn't 6'6", but he was probably 6'3", 6'4". Yeah, I would say, 6'3", 6'4". Probably, closing in on 280, 300. I mean, he was a big guy, really incredible worker. But he never came in then. And it was because it was years later when I saw him in Georgia. It had to be, a couple of years. So it was probably like maybe the reason he couldn't come in was because of his age, that they didn't know that, the commission probably wouldn't have licensed a guy that young to do pro wrestling in California because he was working in all those non-commissioned states. That really could have been it. But anyway, he was, the Freebirds got real big in Georgia, and then, of course, Dallas, Texas, the Freebirds, Von Erich's feud, one of the greatest feuds in wrestling history. And Terry was the worker of the group. Michael Hayes was the talker, incredible talker. Terry Gordy, fantastic worker. Buddy Roberts was, I don't know what exactly he was, but he was the greatest Buddy Roberts that there ever could be. I mean, it was a great unit. And the Freebirds pretty much broke up when Terry Gordy got big in Japan in the mid to late 80s. Mid-80s, because he was teaming with Stan. The actual first thing, the first big Terry Gordy match in Japan was in '83, which was the Terry Funk retirement match. It was the Funks against Stan Hansen and Terry Gordy, and it was just one of the most heated matches you'll ever see. And Terry was there to do the job at the time. So this is... trying to remember. It was I think it was August of '83. I think it was '83. So Terry's 22 years old at the time, something like that. Yeah, I think 22, and he's in this big match at the Denon Coliseum main event, and he worked his way up to where him and Stan were like the two top foreigners. They did the of course, Terry Gordy and Steve Williams was the biggest, is actually his most famous tag team in Japan, and they also tag teamed in the United States against the Steiner brothers. Gordy and Doc, what a fantastic team. They wrestled a lot against Misawa and Kawada when Masao and Kawada were still a team, and then Masao and Kobashi, Kawada and Taue, and then Terry overdosed on a trip to Japan. He was a heavy party guy, and I remember we were in Japan once, and the tour was starting, and he was at the hotel, and some people were there to talk to, her friends with him. I didn't really know him. I actually met him first on that tour. I may have met him before, but it's the first time I would have remember socializing with him. But I just remember the first night. It was like it was the day before the tour, and he just flown in the day before that, and it was just kind of like there were people who were talking to him, and it was kind of like the word is, the day Terry Gordy arrives in Japan for 24 hours, nobody gets near him because he just gets loaded on airplanes, and I guess to go on the flight. So this would have been in the 80s, I think. I think late 80s. This sounds about right. So in 92, 93, whatever the year was, on one of those flights, he did whatever he did, and he ended up in a coma, and he nearly died from an overdose on an airplane. They got him off the plane. They got him medical attention. He lived, but he was never the same. He did continue to wrestle, but it was sad to watch. He just didn't have it anymore. And he actually came to WWF years later as the Masked Executioner. They wanted to do a big feud with him and The Undertaker, but because people wanted to believe that Terry Gordy could still be Terry Gordy, but he just couldn't at that point. And he died in his, I think he was 41 years old maybe when he died. Died very young. So his son ended up wrestling in WWF years later. In fact, he was Doc Gallows' tag team partner when it was, what was it, Festus, and what was the partner with Festus? Remember the?
Oh God, he was what the hell was his gimmick? He was it's gonna drive me nuts.
I know it's gonna drive me nuts too. Something in Festus. They were like the country guys when they would clap the hands or something like that, or the bell would ring and Festus would go crazy and everything.
Oh, Jesse?
Jesse and Festus, yeah. So he was Jesse, Terry Gordy Jr., Ray Gordy. So that's, the stuff on Terry Gordy. But you ever want to watch tapes of Terry Gordy was an incredible working big guy. He was, I remember with him again, like with Misawa and in that era with Stan Hansen, Jumbo Tsuruta. That was a glory, it's a hell of an era for pro wrestling. I think because he started so young, the one thing that I think happened, and he worked such a hard style that and it probably did lead to like a lot of painkiller use, and he was already a party guy too, but his knees did get pretty bad by the time he was in his early 30s, and he was starting to decline. He did drop a lot of weight, so that alleviated the knee problem. So he wasn't nearly as big, but he was still big. But he was still, a super top guy until the overdose. And after the overdose, that was it. But up until then, Terry Gordy would have been considered one of the best guys in the entire business as far as bell-to-bell work, and he was a big-time star, especially in Japan.
All right, we got to talk some modern wrestling here, including the fallout from last night's epic WWE pay-per-view. What'd you think of Raw?
It's just the same old. It was all... So here's the thing. I felt, as soon as the show started, I felt that we were going with Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley.
I was positive.
Yeah. So that's going to be next week's main event.
Yep.
Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley, winner gets Brock. So I will presume that it's going to be Roman Reigns because of the way they book.
Because he lost at the pay-per-view.
Right.
Bobby Lashley.
Right. So here's the thing. It's like, wouldn't it be so much better? I mean, okay, the match wouldn't be as good, but to have, well, I mean, if it was Seth Rollins, the match would actually be better, but I could see why you don't want to put Roman Reigns against Seth Rollins. There's a million reasons not to do that match. But flip things around and put, like, I don't know who you put in there. You could put Elias. You could put Finn Balor in there. Somebody else. Because it's like, if Roman Reigns beats Bobby Lashley next week, which I'm going to guess happens. I mean, I don't know, obviously. It defeats the entire purpose of Bobby Lashley getting that win. I mean, it serves no purpose now. If the thing they should do, if Roman Reigns is the guy who's going to beat Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley should be the guy who beat Roman Reigns and doesn't lose to anybody, and then works a program with Roman Reigns after Roman Reigns gets the title back, rather than Bobby Lashley losing next week to Roman Reigns before Roman Reigns wins the title. Of course, the whole
thing is, if Roman faced somebody else next week and won and then beat Brock, Lashley at least still has a win over the guy that you can use to build up something after SummerSlam.
Exactly.
But if he beats him next week, then it's gone. It's done.
It's not done. They're 50-50, but it's not as strong. But it's like what's the purpose of Bobby Lashley getting the win over Roman Reigns? Why that made sense, and it did make sense, even though Roman Reigns is going for the championship, is that you make yourself a contender, because presumably Brock's going to lose the title at SummerSlam. I mean, who the hell knows? Every time you think he's going to lose the title, he signs another contract, and just because he did that angle with Cormier, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, because the reality is Vince has enough money that he can pay him UFC money if he wants to keep him. And if Brock can get UFC money doing pro wrestling rather than fighting, he's going to take it. So it's not like it's this. The only reason Brock is fighting in UFC is because he can make more money in UFC than he can in WWE. He can make big money either way. And so, the other thing too, watching the show, and we've talked about this only a million times, but the reaction to every mention of Brock Lesnar, and just the way the crowd is like, they have completely ruined Brock Lesnar. I mean, it's like, because remember, Brock was so special, and when he came, it was something special, and now it's like the people just wanted him stripped of the title. Like, instead of like wanting a match,
they were so mad when Kurt Angle announced he was going to be stripped, and then Paul Heyman came out and kept stopping him from being stripped. They wanted that title taken off the guy.
They didn't even want the match. They wanted it stripped because they're so over, and you can see it everywhere. People are so over Brock, and it's because of this angle that Vince McMahon put together. I mean, like, this seriously, as far as an angle, like, angles are supposed to enhance your product, and this angle has greatly detracted. It didn't help Roman Reigns one iota, and it killed Brock Lesnar, who was, Brock Lesnar was probably the most popular guy in the whole promotion. If you went to those WrestleManias where Brock got the biggest reaction year after year, it's like remember the one here? I mean, he got way bigger reaction than Undertaker or anybody the year they had it here, and to just throw that away in an attempt that failed to get Roman Reigns cheered. I mean, like, what kind of an angle? That angle was so detrimental. The one where every week he's advertised and they false advertise him and they tell him to stay home, and then they go in there and go, well, Brock's not coming because he hates wrestling and he has no respect for you fans. It's like, that did a lot of good. Yeah, I just watched that opening segment and the way the crowd reacted to the mentions of Brock Lesnar's name, and it's like, they killed Brock Lesnar for no reason. They pay him all this money, and it was Vince McMahon. I mean, this was his angle. It's nobody else. It's not Brock Lesnar. People actually blame Brock Lesnar. I mean, I guess they did such a great job in convincing people this angle was real, because it's like over and over, people are just so furious at Brock Lesnar. And it's kind of like, don't you know that like this is like an angle? Like people are actually thinking that he's refusing to come back and drop the title and, walking out on his contract and all this. And it's just an angle. I mean, I guess maybe some people didn't think it's an angle because it's so incredibly stupid and dishonest. I mean, as far as the false advertising aspect of it goes, of, advertising him for shows. And then those house shows where they would have him do those 30-second matches with the idea that we're going to have him beat people in, Brock's house show matches would usually be 3 to 5 minutes where he would just destroy everybody. But then they got it down to like 30, 40 seconds with the idea that it will come out that Brock's only working 30 to 40 seconds. And instead of it making him more of a monster, the idea is that it's because he refuses to do anything. So so we have to do these quick matches because it's all he'll do. It's like that's the mentality behind it to get him hated even more so that Roman Reigns would get cheered. I mean, what a, between that and the frickin' Bayley Sasha Banks thing, God damn. I mean, I don't know. There's some fundamentally flawed stuff there.
Well, let's start at the beginning here. Kurt comes out, thanks everyone for their effort and dedication to last night's pay-per-view. But there's someone who has not shown effort and dedication, Brock Lesnar. Talks about his ultimatum, says Brock isn't here, therefore, he is stripping Lesnar of the title. Everybody cheers. Paul Heyman comes out, people boom out of the building, they don't want him out there. He says Brock isn't here. Angle says, okay, I'm stripping him of the title. Paul says, no. Brock loves WWE. He wants to be here. He loves being the champion. The whole thing is he wants to challenge for the UFC heavyweight title as the WWE champion. And that's why he's not coming back right now. Just like you, Kurt Angle, won the WWE title with your Olympic gold medal strapped around your neck.
It's not exactly the same thing.
No. And of course, Kurt says, listen, I'm going to keep this simple. He either defends at SummerSlam or he's no longer the champion. So Paul says, fine. He'll defend at SummerSlam. Everybody boos. Paul then says, all we need to do is find out who's going to challenge him. So we got the parade of guys coming out. Lashley, McIntyre, Rollins, Elias, Balor, Roman Reigns. Coach says all these men have a valid claim to face Lesnar. And Cole says nobody has a bigger point than Roman Reigns.
Okay, so...
Like, this dude lost last night to Lashley.
How come Ziggler didn't come out?
That's right.
Strowman at least had his excuse. I mean,
Rollins lost.
Rollins lost, but Ziggler won, and he didn't come out.
No, he did not.
So the Intercontinental Champion isn't even one of the top 6 contenders.
Nope.
And really top 7.
Well, I mean, we don't even know if they're contenders. They just came out and said they wanted it. So I guess he just should have come out.
Why didn't he?
I mean, Kurt didn't call these guys out. They came out on their own. They were reaching for the brass ring. Ziggler was not.
McIntyre came out, so I don't know. It's like it just tells you like the Intercontinental title is a joke.
So he signed 2 triple threat matches. Winners face off next week. As soon as he said Elias, Roman, Lashley, and Rollins. Elias, Rollins, Lashley, Reigns, McIntyre, Balor. Like I knew immediately where they were going, and it is exactly where they went.
I thought the same thing. I thought that it's Roman getting his win back next week.
Yep. I mean, they could do like a double finish and do a 3-way at SummerSlam. I mean, that's not out of the question, I don't think. I don't think anything's out of the question.
They could do that. Like I definitely could see that. But then here's the thing, though. They could do that, but it kind of cheapens it. You know what I mean? It's like after all this chase for years and years and years, Roman Reigns really does need to beat the guy in a one-on-one match, and it probably is.
If you were in charge, you would book Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar to singles match again? Because, I mean, I wouldn't. That match is going to die the death of all deaths in New York.
Oh, in New York, I know. But whose fault is that?
Well, I mean, that's another story entirely. But where we are right now, I would not book that match in New York.
Yeah, so they're booking it in New York. Lashley's not going to help it any.
Well, at least it's different. At least It's something different. And if you put Lashley in there, the fans can at least believe that maybe Roman isn't going to win. If it's only Roman versus Brock, they're going to hijack that match like nothing else because they hate Brock and they hate Roman. So why would they possibly care? At least with Lashley in there, there's a smidgen of hope that maybe Lashley will leave with the title. And you've got a possibility that some people will be invested in the match. There's no possibility if it's that singles match again.
Yeah, I tell you what, the idea of Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar at the Barclays Center, that has disaster written all over it.
Sure,
it really
does.
Man.
It absolutely does.
Can you imagine? I mean, and the thing is, it's like there's no reason it should be like that. I mean, this is 100% on the booking because number one, the Roman Reigns stuff, if they would have just, they could have turned that thing around in 2015. Just done what New Japan did with Naito. I mean, it's so simple, but they wouldn't do it. And then with Brock, I mean, they actively, like with Roman, the problem with Roman was that, he was being pushed at first when the public wanted Daniel Bryan to be the top guy, and it was a protest against him. And that just grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Even when Daniel Bryan wasn't there, people just hated Roman to hate Roman. So, that was that. But with Brock, I mean, Brock was super over. And, I mean, they just actively they wouldn't have shit on the match. They would have shit on Roman because we were in the Santa Clara show. They did not shit on the Brock Lesnar-Roman Reigns match, and they had a hell of a match. They did hate Roman Reigns, I mean, with a passion. But it was an incredibly heated match, and they cheered Brock Lesnar more than anyone in the show. So it wasn't like, they had to kill Brock Lesnar. The idea was we will kill Brock Lesnar to build Roman Reigns, except everything they've ever done to build Roman Reigns, from Daniel Bryan losing to him and endorsing him and telling people that he's the guy, to The Rock coming out and telling people he's the guy, to him saving people left and right, every single thing has been rejected. And it's like they felt, because historically they've been very good at this, they felt that Vince felt that he can manipulate this audience. And he was wrong, and he's just dug a deeper hole. I mean, they got all kinds of money, and it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, none of this matters. They're still going to, SummerSlam sold out the first day that the scalpers bought all the 6,000 tickets. It was already gone. The network number is going to be what the network number is. But yeah, I mean, the idea of they're going to have a main event that the crowd's going to crap on again. So all this, the climax, and then that's Roman's big win after all these years. If that's what it is. Maybe, yeah, they could do a 3-way and put Lashley over, which would actually be real good if they did that.
So then we had Baron yelling at Kurt. He says he did this without authorization. Kurt says, I didn't think I needed it. Baron can't believe that he was not added to the matches, but Finn was. And Kurt says, well, he beat you. And of course, now we have all the questions about Lashley beat Reigns. Reigns is still in there. Rollins also lost. He's in. So anyway, they just had guys in there. First match, Finn, Roman, Drew McIntyre. They had a good match. Balor did a big dive outside early. Later, Drew did this giant dive. Balor went up top. Drew hit him with a chair, which is legal in a 3-way. Roman speared McIntyre through the barricade outside. Balor hit the coup de grace on Roman, but Drew yanked him out of the ring. Crowd went nuts for that spot because they thought that Finn was going to pin Roman. And Drew ended up hitting Balor with the Claymore. Roman sent Drew outside. Roman spears Finn, gets the pinfall. It was actually an amazing mix of cheers and boos for him winning. Like, the women were so happy, the men were so upset. Got a hell of a reaction one way or the other by the time this was over. Roman advances.
Yeah, the crowd was actually pretty dead until McIntyre, like, late in the match, did the flip dive, and then they just react. That's a pattern of a lot of TV matches with WWE, that the people just sit there and do nothing, and then somebody will do, like, this crazy move, and then the match is over. Then people like it. And that was what happened here. It was like, I was thinking, like, they're not even, like, really, like, you got Finn Balor, who should be more popular, but that's on them because of the way they booked him. You got McIntyre, who they really want. You can really see, like, they protected him in this match. They made him look strong in this match. They they definitely have ideas for him and plans for him to be a big star. But he didn't get a big reaction to what he did. And then you have Roman, who, for the most part, is kind of a negative reaction to. So then, by McIntyre did the big move, then everything was over. The last couple of minutes of the match were very, very good. So it was a good match.
Yeah, the continuation of what... I realize I'm prone to hyperbole, but this is the worst feud in the history of WWE. It's absolutely the worst.
It's horrible. I'll give you that. But you know what? Okay. Storyline wise, it's horrible, but it's still. I still think it still has to. You still have to have crappy matches for it to beat the Randy Orton Bray Wyatt feud. That Randy Orton Bray Wyatt feud was really horrible.
But at least that was like a month or two. This has been going on for like 2 years now. And it looks like it's going to go on for like 10 more years at this rate.
It looked like they made up.
Bailey met with Kurt, said the therapy didn't work out very well. Says, I tried. I was open and honest. You know what? I think that Sasha tried as well, but it just didn't work. I don't think we're ever going to be together again.
Once she said that Sasha tried, it's like, wait a minute. You're supposed to feud with her. But
yep.
The feud's over.
Kurt says, no, we solve our problems in the ring. You guys are going to have a tag team match tonight. She says, this is a terrible idea. He says, if you guys can't get along, one of you is going to be traded to SmackDown.
How come?
And she's appalled. Like, oh my God, to go to SmackDown.
I know.
Clearly she knows nothing about this new TV deal.
Yeah. The other thing, too, is that it's like there have only been like a million feuds in WWE, and at no point in the middle of a feud, or not even in the middle, in the beginning of a feud, do you go in there and go, you two guys need to get along, or I'm going to trade one of you so you never have a match. It's like, what is wrestling built on?
I'm flabbergasted by this.
Yeah.
Ziggler promo said all I did last night was everything I said it was going to do. Put on a clinic. First time the Intercontinental title headline. I'm laughing because I know where this is going. So anyway, out comes Bobby Roode.
Okay, wait a bit. So this isn't the first time the Intercontinental title's headlined.
And he says it's been decades since it's headlined a pay-per-view.
That can't be right. Can it? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I was going to say like the U.S. title open challenge when Cena was the champion, but that was the U.S. title. So he may be right.
I guess.
Anyway, Bobby Roode comes out. He says it was awfully lucky for you to have Drew McIntyre there. Without Drew, you'd be out performing in lame comedy clubs. And
yeah, that's such a funny inside joke.
Ziggler says, how did it feel to be on the sidelines last night? Roode says, it sucked. I'm out here to challenge you.
No shit, it sucked. He had to watch that show?
Yeah. Dolph says no. Roode says he's a coward. Dolph demands a ref, says let's do it. Ref comes out. Dolph says, I only said we'd have a match. The title's not on the line. So they have a non-title match. Bobby Roode versus Dolph Ziggler. Non-title. They wrestle. It goes a fair amount of time. There's a lot of chin locks. It never gets out of second gear. They just keep doing their moves. And then, in what was like a transition spot, Ziggler hits a super kick, covers the guy, 1, 2, 3. It's over.
Yep.
Roode has to be turning heel, right?
Yeah,
he has to be.
I would think so. I would think he has to be, yeah.
Boy, did they make him a geek here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a double geek because everyone knows when you make it a non-title match that the challenger has to win.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. So this was designed to make him look like a geek, which I think it means he's got to be turning heel. Especially because later, well, I'll get to that later.
You know what, though? He might as well.
Hey, dude, of course he might as well. He is way better as a heel than a babyface. He's completely miscast as a babyface. We had Lashley doing an old-school pro wrestling promo backstage. No interviewer, looked right in the camera, didn't say much, but he did vow to become the new Universal Champion. Roode's upset backstage. Mojo Rawley runs into him. He says, you're supposed to be glorious. He walks off, and Roode is furious. So Maybe they're going to drop the entrance. The one thing that was over with this guy.
Oh, no.
Turn him heel.
No, God, that'd be so bad.
Dude, they changed Nakamura's music when he turned, so I'm sure they'll have to change his music.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah, but Nakamura's music only changed a little bit.
We'll see what they do.
They may think that. I could definitely see them thinking that music is too over as a babyface, so we have to give him new music, and if we give him new music, then people will hate him. But you know what? If they gave him new music, people may just not care about him.
Well, they don't care about him now, except for the entrance, so I'm not sure how much further he can fall.
Good. So let's take the one thing that's over away from him. That's always smart. That's like booking Brock Lesnar.
Well, this is how they do things. He'll get heat.
And everyone. Yeah.
Mojo, Tyler Breeze. I like both these guys. I like Mojo. I like Tyler Breeze. Hundreds of thousands of people turned off the TV during this match. They went way longer than they needed to. There were chin locks galore. They were laying there on the mat. And finally, Mojo finished him off with a hard Alabama slam. Don't see this as a big ratings grabber here. No, but obviously somebody wants to give Mojo Rawley a push, and well, they should be killing guys like Tyler Breeze in like 30 seconds.
I expect it
not
to be
going 4 minutes and laying on the mat in chin locks. It's not going to get the guy over.
I expect it to be shorter, but the key is going to be that they got to get Mojo in there and with the top guys. I mean, as long as he wins here, it's okay, but he needs to start getting with tougher guys.
And then here we go. Bayley and Sasha versus Alicia and Dana Brooke. Heat on Bayley. She gets sent outside. Alicia Fox goes after her on the outside. Sasha cannot handle this. She runs over to make the save. Hair whips Dana off the apron. She crashes on the ground. A hard bump. Sasha wipes them both out with a crossbody off the apron. The ref rings the bell. There is no announcement. I don't know if it was a count-out, disqualification, double count-out.
It was double count-out. Ref counted to 10 and rang the bell. So it was clearly a double count-out.
It's nice to announce it, though, And then Sasha stormed to the back. So they go backstage, and Bayley's like, "What's going on here?" And Sasha says, "It's one thing for me to beat you up, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone else do it." And Bayley says, "Wow, you care." And Sasha goes in this big soliloquy, "Yes, I care.
I love you.
I love how nice you are. I love how the little girls look up to you. I hate talking about my feelings, but the truth is, I love you, and I've always loved you." And then she turns and storms away. I was crying during this. This is the worst feud I've ever seen. There's nothing close, Dave. It's been going on for, it feels like 10 years now. They're back together again? Are you kidding me?
It's really only been about 8 months, but it does feel like it's 10 years. It's just ridiculous.
I'm sure it's a swerve, and one of them's going to turn on the other. Now that Sasha's spilled her feelings, Bayley's going to do something dastardly, so now this time for sure Bayley will get booed. We tried the first time and they cheered her. Damn it, we're going to do it again. We're going to get her booed this time. God. And it's just going to go on and on and on.
Oh, God, maybe it'd be like Roman Reigns and we'll have 3 years of this crap.
That's the way they're going. That's the way they're going here. Braun Strowman promo. I regret nothing, but I do regret I didn't get a chance to congratulate this guy. And they note that he opted out of the triple threat matches tonight, and he points out, who cares? It doesn't matter if I win or lose. I got this briefcase. Someday I'll cash in. So at least that made sense why he didn't care if he lost that cage match. He's got the briefcase. Who cares? He can lose every match. So I like that, at least, as stupid as it is, they made sense of it.
Well, at least they explained him not coming out where everyone else came out, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, quite frankly, he did lose that match, so, I mean, he shouldn't have been in that.
Yeah, but so did Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. That doesn't mean anything.
You're right. B-Team versus Ascension. Revival's watching on. Short match. B-Team wins. Bray and Matt appear on the big screen. They will have their rematch next week on Raw. Vowed to win back the titles. Alexa and Mickey came out. Alexa's out there rambling about last night. Nobody cares. She's actually waiting for the fans to begin chanting for Ronda Rousey. There's like one human being in the audience chanting. So she pretends they're chanting.
No, they chanted for Ronda before she even acknowledged it. There was definitely a chant.
When she was waiting for the chant, there was no chant. I went back to listen.
Okay, but
they may have chanted earlier, like when she came out.
They definitely chanted earlier.
But not when she was waiting for the chant. So anyway, Ronda starts heading through the crowd. She's suspended. She's not supposed to be here. Comes through the crowd. They got heavy, hardcore eye makeup on her this week.
Why was that?
It's just what they do. Lays out Mickey.
It was stupid. I mean, I was looking and go like, who does her makeup? I mean, whoever did her makeup did a horrible job.
She lays out Mickey, goes for the arm. Referees break it up. Rousey rushes up the ramp, beats up the officials, drags Alexa back, going for the armbar. Kurt runs out. Everybody boos. This guy is he's such a geek. They've turned him into such a geek authority figure. They hate this guy, even though he's a babyface. He says, you have 2 days left on your suspension. You got to go home and wait it out. Constable Corbin comes out, says she deserves a harsher punishment. He's right, by the way. And then he's going to call Stephanie, but he can't find his phone. He goes backstage. Kurt reveals he has the phone. And then he says, you're suspended for 1 more week, but I'm going to give you a championship match against Alexa Bliss at SummerSlam.
This makes plenty of sense. So he's a thief.
He's a thief. He's the one who suspended her.
Yeah.
But now he's all cool with her coming back, and he's rewarding her for coming back early on her suspension. This is, I don't know. But hey, she's getting that championship match.
She's getting a championship match, and that's the big thing.
That's the big thing.
Yep. She's probably going to win the title, don't you think? SummerSlam?
You're asking me to predict what these people are going to do with anything?
I mean, she should.
There's, who should have won the title is Asuka. Instead, she lost in a shark cage match to Carmella. So if you're asking if I think Ronda Rousey's going to win, at this point, no. I think she's never going to win. I'm not sure anybody's ever going to win again, except heels.
She's going to win. She's going to win. She's an Asuka. I can't explain Asuka. It's just inexplicable. But Ronda Rousey, look, they're paying Ronda Rousey far too much money.
Dave, hold on a second. Dave, they're paying Brock millions of dollars, and they're booking an angle to give him go away heat.
Well, the idea was he's leaving, and the idea was to get Roman over. I mean, that was always the idea. Whereas with Ronda, it's not about. I mean, it's about Stephanie, but Stephanie hasn't been on TV lately. So the idea is to get Ronda over. So whereas before the idea wasn't to get. I mean, it really was to get Brock over as a heel for Roman, and to give him all that credibility and things like that. So. Anyway, I think Ronda's going to win the title.
She should win it at SummerSlam. But I have so little faith now that I refuse to make that prediction. Charlie's with Seth. Says, Roman's my friend, but if I have to go through him to get to Lesnar, I will. And I know Roman would do the same. AOP squashed Titus Worldwide. They killed...
They threw Titus into the post and then did the last chapter on Apollo Crews. And that was it.
Ember Moon beat Ember Moon faced and lost to Sarah Logan, who is now a Viking. The announcer spent the entire match talking about her Viking ways. Match was not very good.
She did no Viking gimmick.
No, I mean, she did it all on social media.
She didn't dress like a Viking. She didn't use a Viking headgear for interference.
Didn't have furry boots.
No Viking stuff, no.
Anyway, Ember went up top, Liv interfered, Logan crotched her, pinned her. They noted it was her first ever win on Raw.
Good.
And finally, Drifter, Seth Rollins, Lashley. Drifter did his deal, burying Buffalo. Announcers had to laugh and snicker. And it's like last night never happened. Seth comes out, he's super over, they're into his match, they cheer for the guy, they chant his name, there's no clock countdown or anything like that. Had a pretty good match. Lashley and Drifter were fighting up top. Seth scooped in underneath. Lashley got a buckle bomb, and then he hit the superplex Falcon Arrow for a near fall on the Drifter. Hit both guys with topes. Sling blade in the ring. Hit a curb stomp on the Drifter, but Lashley broke it up. And then Seth finally tried the curb stomp on Lashley, but Drifter broke it up. Turned around into a spear by Lashley. Lashley wins. Roman Lashley next week. Winner gets Brock Lesnar. I mean, there have been worse shows, I won't lie. But this was not a very, very exciting show.
Yeah, I didn't think much of it. I didn't think it was terrible, but a lot of the storylines were kind of weak, and I don't know that it dragged, but there was no spark to it at all.
Alrighty, the G1. What's the update?
See anything today? I saw everything but the main event.
I haven't seen anything today.
Okay, it was good. I mean, too much interference, and I didn't see the main event, but apparently there was ref bumps there in that one as well. It was Hangman Page and Michael Elgin had a hell of a match. It was Hangman Page is this is like 2 matches in a row, but this one was better than the one with Fale. I mean, he looked good in the Fale match, but he looked great in this match. And Elgin, Elgin's a good Japanese style wrestler, so Elgin won with a Elgin bomb, but Page, Page definitely looked like a star in this match. I mean, probably more, except for on being the Elite, I would say that in the ring, Page felt more like a star watching him here than anything I've seen of him really. Then the next match was Yoshihashi against Evil, which Evil won, and it was good. It was never great. Then we had Suzuki and Makabe, and that, to me, I thought this match was great. It was just a Minoru Suzuki match, and he didn't sell his leg. It was just a brawl, and Makabe gave him the spider suplex and then went for the knee drop, and Suzuki got up. So he kind of knee dropped Suzuki, who was standing, and knocked him down, and then climbed up and did a second knee drop. This time Suzuki is on his back and pinned him. In the Yoshihashi Evil match, there was a spot. They were near the ropes, and Yoshihashi picks him up for a power bomb, and for whatever reason loses his balance, and they both tumble over the top rope backwards. Yoshihashi's backwards, Evil's forwards, but Yoshihashi he just lost him, falls over. Evil's just takes his bad looking bump, but somehow he's holding on, and Yoshihashi ends up going over the top with him, and that was really awkward. And then they went right back. So when they both recover, probably 30 seconds later, they go in the ring and they go back to the exact spot to tell everyone essentially that, yes, in fact, we botched a spot. I mean, instead of just going you don't go right back to it so everyone knows, but they just did it. So that happened there. The Makabe won. So Suzuki's 0-2. Then we had Okada and Bad Luck Fale, and it was good, but the finish really sucked. It was Tamatonga hit the gun stun on Okada, and then Bad Luck Fale hit the Bad Luck Fall. Referee was out during all this, and Tanga Loa interfered a lot. Okada looked really good, especially in the last couple of minutes. But, I just thought as far as the finish went, didn't do anything for me. Just all the interference. It was just too much. And I know that Jay White beat Tanahashi by attacking the knee. So that went as kind of as planned or as expected. So Jay's 2-0. I'm trying to think who else is 2-0, but he's the key guy. So he's getting the big push.
Hey, we got Jericho and the Young Bucks versus the Bullet Club on the Rager, the boat.
Yeah, they did the campiest, cheesiest spoof on an angle that I've ever seen. So it's like Jericho. It started where Marty Scurll goes to Cody and Omega and says that he was hiding in Chris Jericho's closet, and he heard that Jericho, invited the Young Bucks to join the Alpha Club. So Cody and Marty and Kenny Omega are all furious, but Cody and Marty Scurll are far more furious than Kenny Omega. They just want to, they're gonna give him a piece of their mind. They're gonna, get back at Jericho for what he did. And Kenny's not nearly as mad, but he goes, okay, you guys go and we'll do that. And you guys go because you're the ones who are mad. So you go in there and yell at them. So they go in there and Cody and Marty Scurll just act like they're best friends while Kenny's sitting there like, wait a minute, you know, what's going on here? They end up having words. They go back and forth. Among the things that happened was, you know, Jericho and Omega are, you know, kind of pushing like this is the first time they've wrestled they're going to wrestle since the Tokyo Dome. And Matt goes, you two guys exposed the business on your podcast, you know, which they did. You know, when they talked about how they set up the match move for move and everything like that. And what else was said? You know, Jericho kept having these lines. So it ends up where Cody and Paige and the Young Bucks, or not Paige, Cody and Marty Scurll and the Young Bucks all end up leaving. And it's just Jericho and Omega face to face. And they're doing this promo. They're doing promos on each other. And in the middle of the promo, Jericho goes, like whispers to him, you want to do my podcast? And Omega goes, yeah. And then they go right back to their promo. So that was just so unintentionally funny. There was another thing where Daniels and Kazarian and Scorpio Sky were at the premiere of 350 Days, the movie on Thursday in Hollywood. And Scorpio Sky was all excited because he thought he was going to finally get a chance to meet one of his idols, Andre the Giant. So I guess he didn't realize that, in fact, Andre the Giant is not alive. But there was a woman wrestler there, Andrea the Giant from Glow. So that's where he got the idea. And Hangman Page was fantastic. So doing stuff. It's who is it that wants to be in the Elite Club? More on the show. Yujiro and well, it's really Chase Owens and Yujiro wanted to be in. So Omega's going to, like, all through this tour, I guess they're going to be on the show. And they did this thing where Kenny Omega invited Paige and Owens to his place to play video games. So this would have been the last couple of days. And they're playing video games. And for some reason, Paige has this flashback and starts attacking Chase Owens like it's like he's Joey Ryan. So that happened there. And then Cody did stuff from the set of the TV show that he's doing. Not much more to that. And Juice Robinson, who debuted, went to Bad Luck Fale and just asked him, you know, I know that you and Yujiro are real tight. So, but I also saw what you did to him, or what they did to him. So who's, you know, basically, Fale said that he was loyal to the Tongans and fuck everyone else. So he's, you know, he's no longer friends with Chase Owens and Yujiro. And I think that, I think there was a line somewhere where, you know the story about Kenny Omega where he said the Japanese don't train as hard as the Americans? Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah. So he did an interview, this is a couple weeks ago, and it got a lot of the Japanese wrestlers mad. But he said that, like, him and Juice Robinson and on these tours and Mike Logan, you know, they train really hard, and the Japanese guys really don't train as hard as they do. And Naito was real mad, saying that, you know, when it comes to conditioning, he'd smoke Kenny Omega every time. And anyway, on Twitter.
So this was an actual thing and not like a storyline?
I mean, it's an interview that he did. That was another thing they did. So this is when Matt Jackson accused Kenny and Chris Jericho of exposing the business on the show, you know, on Jericho's podcast. Kenny goes, you know, that was just storyline, like the idea that their expose was storyline and not real. So, but anyway, so the deal is that when Omega said that, it wasn't that a big deal in Japan. And then the Japanese wrestlers were all mad, which it was the idea to begin with. So, you know, it helps us feud with whether it's Tanahashi or Naito or whoever it's going to be, right? It's another Okada match. It gets some heat. I mean, that's the idea of what he said. But here, certain individuals, or I don't know who, but apparently Kenny was getting harassed on Twitter in the United States by Americans who thought that he was racist for what he said, when it was probably pretty much an angle. So anyway, Yujiro comes up to Kenny and calls him a racist. It was so funny because he asked why he wasn't on Being the Elite, and he said that he was, are you a racist? Oh, God. It was so ridiculous. So Being the Elite is like, when you watch that, it was out before Raw. Usually I watch it after Raw, but I watch it like right before Raw. And it's like, oh my God. It's like there's more entertainment in that 20 minutes than in like the last like 4 weeks of Raw. That's how, I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's a low bar.
It's just like all these guys doing like these silly things. I mean, it's all silly, but it still like it somehow gets everybody over, unlike Raw, which is like, I don't know what it is, and you have these great characters that should get over that don't. It's just such a weird thing.
All right, finally, before we go here today, Sinclair and Tribune, their merger not looking good.
No, the FTC or is it FCC, but anyway, it's looking like that they're not going to approve the merger, because what Sinclair did is Sinclair sold a bunch of stations, but in the sale, they retained control of the programming. So they essentially will still run the channels that they sold. So the commission basically felt that they would have too much power in too many markets, more than would be allowable. So they would not approve. Everyone figured the sale was going to go through for sure, and today it came out it probably won't. So it's a big deal for Ring of Honor, because they were going to add TV in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, and now that's on hold.
All right, we are out of time, everybody. We're going to try and do a bunch of Q&A questions on Wednesday. You can send those to mailbag@wrestlingobserver.com. The new back issue of The Observer is up right now, so head up there and check that out. And lots of stuff up on the front page, new shows, more on Masa Saito on The Observer Live that went up today, so check that out. And that is it. We will talk to you again after a while.